Okay, hello, my followers and subscribers and just casual watchers. This is Scott Rathkamp, and we're going to be looking at some apologetics, Christian apologetics. And the question we're going to deal with today is, does God really exist? Does God really exist? So let's jump in there. Before I go too far, I want to make some attribution. Attribution is basically explaining where I get my data from. I am not an original research scientist or theologian. Much of what I get is from studying various books and whatnot, and I try to put together all possible sides of the story and share that with you so that you can decide what is important for you. This particular set of questions and answers are going to be attributed to. First book is called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norm Geisler and Frank Turek. This is an excellent book if you're interested in Christian apologetics, and a lot of ideas. In fact, some of the slide material comes directly out of this book. And then to get down into the technical details, I also use this book called The Return of the God Hypothesis from Stephen Meyer. And as we go through this, you'll probably recognize some material from Stephen's book. Okay, so why do we ask, can I know God? Does he really exist? Why do we even bother asking that question? Well, most people are going to be faced during their lifetime with three big questions. And the questions are, where did I come from? Not just like what city and state or hospital did I come from, but where do I really come from? Where did my mother and father come from? Where do people in general come from? Where does the human beings come from? Where do I come from? Are we intentionally created? Did somebody actually create us? Or are we just a result of a random accident of things coming together? Okay, so that's a question. Next question is, why am I here? Am I just here to take up space, eat dinner, use resources, materials? Am I here for a purpose? What's my purpose? Do I even have a purpose? Or am I just dancing to my chemistry? That just means my chemistry is going on in my body and my brain is just happening according to the laws of chemistry, and I'm just an accident. Whatever my chemistry says, I do. No purpose. All right, the third question is, where do I go when I die? Actually, this is probably the first of the three questions that most people ask as they grow older. Where do I go when I die? Is it the big nothing, or is it eternal existence? The big nothing just means when I close my eyes the last time, there is nothing. It's all over. It's over, Rover. You're done. Or am I passing on to some sort of eternal existence? And that eternal existence is tied closely to the question, is there a God? And what's my relationship to him? So, are we on a truth quest or a happiness quest? And that's a question I'm asking you, not one of the three questions, but when you set out to tackle these questions, one of the questions I think you need to ask yourself, and I'm asking them now, is, am I really looking for the truth, or am I just looking for a reason to be happy, a method to be happy, something I can be happiness about? It's called the happiness quest, because we're going to look at some evidence that is based upon true facts, and maybe some of them are not going to be comfortable. But if it's the truth, will I accept it, or am I just going to ignore everything that is not on my happiness list? So we'll kind of use that as a background guiding question as we go along. Now, who actually is doing the asking of these questions? There's a number of different methods and theories and ways that we can define whether or not God existed. And there's lots of different people with different ideas. They need different technical answers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out three of them based upon most of the people that have questions or ask this question or talk to me about it. So we're going to look at three different ways of answering the question, does God exist? The first one is called the cosmological argument. The cosmological argument is based upon a scientific basis. So people that are comfortable with science and technology and all sorts of technical stuff like that, the cosmological argument probably makes most sense to you. This is the scientist. The next one I'm going to be talking about is intelligent design. And this is the folks that like follow the numbers, follow the money. Give me the numbers, give me the stats, and then I'll make my decision. And then the third one is morality. And the morality is, does it make sense? Does it make sense to me? Morality, decisions that people make based upon morality are usually based upon what we call my gut feeling. I feel comfortable with. These are things that I don't really care about the numbers. What I feel right is right is right. So those are the three different kinds of researches we can do to answer the question, does God really exist? So let's start off with the cosmological argument. All right, the cosmological argument is based upon the fact that there are immutable natural laws. If we look throughout the universe, there are just some things that happen. They're being driven by laws. They're immutable. They're unchangeable. Example, gravity. Gravity is a law, the law of gravity. It's in effect at all times, in all places, to all persons, and yesterdays and todays and tomorrows. If I were to take a tennis ball and drop it, that ball's going to fall to the floor. And if I drop it 10 more times, it's going to fall to the floor. And if I drop it 100 more times, it's going to fall, because the law of gravity is immutable. It doesn't change. If I drop that ball one more time, is gravity going to say, that's it, I've had enough, you've dropped it enough, I'm not going to pull it down, it's going up? No, of course not. Gravity is a law, it's immutable. And so what we're talking about is immutable natural laws that don't change. All right? Then we're going to look at cause and effect, sometimes called the law of causality. And the law of cause and effect says that everything that begins to exist requires a prior and sufficient cause. Okay? Cause and effect. And we deal often with cause and effect. In fact, science is actually impossible to do without cause and effect. The whole field of science is based upon searching for effects and their causes and their effects. This is the basic building block of science. And life is not rational without cause and effect. You cannot live rationally without cause and effect. For example, if I said, well, I don't believe in cause and effect. Really? You don't believe in cause and effect? What caused you to come to that conclusion? Remember, if all we're built is wet molecules and chemistry that we're bouncing to, then answering questions or thinking about something has a cause. I'm caused to come to that conclusion because I thought about it. Right? So I can't turn off cause and effect. It's just like I can't turn off gravity. All right, so let's look at this law of causality. Anything that begins to exist must have a prior sufficient cause. Let's look first at cause and effect as random versus intelligent. The cause itself and then the effect, and whether or not that process is done randomly or intelligently. All right, so here's a picture. It's probably the Grand Canyon. It's a great big gash in the middle of the land out there in Arizona with a river running through it. So cause and effect. The effect, we can see it. It's the Grand Canyon. What's the cause of that? Did someone come along with a big shovel and start digging? Probably not. The cause is what we called erosion. Now, whether that erosion came from ice and wind and rain, or a very big river emptying out a big lake very quickly, or a flood draining out, whatever, it was a random process. the water didn't decide to take this rock, but not that one. So the cause is essentially rainwater or water. The effect is the Grand Canyon, and the process was random. Now what about this one? Here's another rock carving. Here's the presidents on a rock at Mount Rushmore. So what's the cause and the effect? Well, the effect are 4 presidents carved into rock on the side of Mount Rushmore. Well, what is the cause? Is the cause of this rainwater and ice and wind and storm? Or is it something else? No, it's something else. The cause here is a sculpture, a sculptor, a person who actually got up there with a hammer and a chisel and a little maybe dynamite here and there and carved out these faces in this rock. So we have a sculptor as the cause. And what about random versus intelligent? Did he just randomly go up there and carve out wherever he wanted? Or did he have a plan, an intelligent design that he worked towards? Well, it was an intelligent design that he purposely set out. It was a sculptor, not random, but a purposeful cause. So let me ask this question. What about the cause here? You come home, open the door, walk into the living room, and there's the living room couch with a living room pillow, slit open, feathers everywhere, and a guilty dog sitting right in the middle of it. What's the cause? What's the effect? Well, the effect is obviously, I've got to do some vacuuming. What's the cause? Well, the dog may want to tell you that, hey, Mom and Dad, it was just an accident. I was laying here and this pillow exploded. I'm glad I survived the explosion. If the dog could talk, he'd probably tell you that. But I think we know that the cause was the dog that tore open the pillow. And it wasn't random. It was an intelligent cause. Although we may not think of dogs as being intelligent, it was a purposeful cause. What about this? We look over in the living room again towards the window, and in front of the window there's a broken glass all over the floor and a baseball. So what was the cause? What was the effect? Well, the effect is obvious. Got broken glass all over the floor, a window with a big hole in it, and a baseball laying there. What was the cause? The cause is the ball. Now, did the ball just accidentally lay there on the floor? No, the ball probably came through the window, and it probably came through the window because somebody hit it with a baseball bat, pointed in the wrong direction, and the cause was whomever held that bat. So now we have a cause, which is not random, and again, it's an intelligent cause. They should have known better this time, but they do display some intelligence. So it's not random, it is intelligent. The cause is the person holding the bat, and the effect is the baseball laying on the floor or broken window. One more. What's the cause of this? This is a picture of the Andromeda Galaxy. It's the closest galaxy to our galaxy, the Milky Way, and it's obviously far, far away. But here is billions upon billions of stars, all collected together in a galaxy, surrounded by some major clusters of more stars spinning around. What's the cause of this? Is this just a random coming together of a bunch of dust and rock? Or is there an intelligent cause behind it? Well, that's the sort of thing we're going to dig into here. Cause and effect. First, we need to ask the question, did it have a beginning? Remember, if it began to exist, it has a cause and effect. So, did it have a beginning? Well, to answer that question, let's start off by looking at the Bible. Does the Bible say it had a beginning? Yes, the Bible says it had a beginning. The first verse of Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, there it is. God created the heavens and the earth. He was the cause, and the universe is the effect. So let's look at that down here. What did he create? Well, he actually created three things. The first thing he created was the beginning. The very first instance of time, the beginning. That Genesis is written in the Hebrew, and the Hebrew word for beginning is Reshit, and Reshit translates into the first instance of anything, the beginning of time, the first start of that. The second thing that was created, he was actually creating, the Hebrew word for creating is bara, and it means I'm creating ex nihilo. That means from nothing. So we're starting with absolutely nothing, and we're creating a beginning. So the beginning starts our time. Creation is the process that we create the heavens. The heavens is Samayim, and this is all spatial dimensions. So anything that takes up space, length, width, distance, height, anything that takes up space is considered spatial dimensions, and in the Jewish that would be referred to as the heavens, Samayim. And then the earth, again in Hebrew in the Eretz, is material. So everything that you see around you that is material, everything you touch and taste and feel, all the air you breathe and the dinner you eat and the water you drink, all of this is considered material. And material in the science world also includes energy. So material and energy. So basically we have God creating, bara, three things: the beginning, the heavens, and the earth. Okay? So basically the heavens equate to space, earth equates to what we're standing on right now, talking about, and beginning is the beginning of time. All right. Let's look at it from a scientist's point of view. Did it have a beginning? In order to explain this from a scientific point of view, I'm going to use a mnemonic called SURGE, S-U-R-G-E. And each of these letters stands for a process or a function. Let's take a look at them. The S stands for the second law of thermodynamics. Sometimes it's called the law of entropy. The second law of thermodynamics. It's a natural process where entropy increases and energy availability decrease. In other words, energy flows from a high energy to a low energy direction. All right. For example, my car is falling apart. All right. As I drive it down the road, things loosen up and eventually it falls apart. It's going from a high order, a high arrangement of things, to a lower arrangement of things. I am leaving parts going down the highway. My house is falling apart. Okay, I have to paint it, I have to fix it, I have to repair it, I got to do some plumbing on it, I got to pour some new concrete in the driveway. My house is falling apart. It's going from a highly ordered state to a less highly ordered state. And my body is falling apart. I'm getting old, and I can tell you for sure that my body is falling apart. I am suffering from what's called the Dresser disease. The Dresser disease is when your chest drops down into your drawers. All right, the Dresser disease. So everything is running down. If everything's running down, then when was it wound up? It had a beginning. If everything's running down, the second law of thermodynamics said it was wound up. It had a beginning. All right, let's look at the U. The U in SURGE. The U stands for the universe is expanding. Edwin Hubble, back in 1929, when he was doing his astronomical work, he worked on this the question about, is the universe expanding, is it contracting? And when he found out that it was expanding, and he looked at it carefully, he found that the increase in distance of a star from us, as the distance increased, the velocity it was flying away from us also increased. Now, that didn't make intuitive sense. I mean, when things are closest, we see it moving fast, and as they go way and way and far away, it looks like they slow down. But here's a situation that's just the opposite. As the increasing distance, the velocity increased. Well, the way that happens, imagine a balloon, the surface of a balloon. If you took a balloon and blowed it up so it was only like 1 inch in diameter, and then took a black magic marker and put little black dots all over the balloon, so they were maybe an inch apart, and then you blow that balloon up to the point where it's maybe 8 inches in diameter. Well, now those black spots have separated. They've gotten wider and wider from each other, further apart from each other. Even the ones on the other side of the balloon are getting further and further away. And if you blow it up from 8 inches to 10 inches, it gets even further apart yet. So as the expansion happens, the velocity of things going apart from each other increases, and the distance increases. So the basically says that the universe is kind of like a balloon expanding, blowing up. So if it's a blowing up balloon and you play the movie in reverse, where is it blowing up from? It's expanding from a point, and that's the kicker. If it expands from a point, it had a beginning, and a lot of people call that beginning the Big Bang. Right? Okay. Let's look at the R in surge. R stands for radiation from the Big Bang. Now, as entropy increases, that's the second law. As the second law increases, the temperature decreases. Imagine a blacksmith in an old village with a horseshoe, and he's got it in his fire and he's heating it up. And when it gets white hot, he pulls it out and sets it down on the bench. It starts to cool down. And as it cools down, the wavelength of the light coming off of that horseshoe gradually expands. It goes from white light to then a bright red, and then it cools down. Actually, it goes like the yellow-orange, and then red, and then dark red, and eventually it cools all the way down to infrared, and we can't even see it anymore. So as the temperature decreases, the length of the wavelengths of light get longer and longer and longer, or redder and redder and redder. Penzias and Wilson, these are two guys that worked for Bell Labs back in the 60s, and they were building antennas. And they had an antenna that they were testing. It was out in the backyard, and they kept getting basically a signal that didn't make sense. It was like the static on an old black and white television. No matter where they pointed the antenna, they got this static. What they found was that the static was the cosmic background radiation in all directions. The cosmic background radiation is basically the color as the universe cooled down. So when the universe was very, very extremely hot and moving quickly and all kinds of very, very short wavelengths of energy, over the years, as it cools down, it's cooled all the way down now to 3.5 degrees Kelvin, which is very cold. That's like negative 453 degrees Fahrenheit, very cold. And as it cools down, it follows this curving graph. Here's an example of a cooling curve. And this cooling curve shows you how the temperature that it cools by slows down as it cools. So when it's really, really hot, it cools quickly. When it gets closer and closer and closer to where it can't cool anymore, it becomes more like a flat line. So we've got this mathematical equation now that can answer the question: if we know how hot an explosion would be of atomic proportion and what the temperature is now, we can then draw this curve. What does this curve tell us? It had a beginning. It had a beginning. So we now have the radiation, or the cosmic background radiation, to show that we have a beginning. All right, now let's look at G. Excuse me. G stands for galaxy seeds. Galaxy seeds are ripples in the cosmic background radiation. Remember the radiation we just talked about, the cosmic background radiation, when it first exploded, when the first Big Bang went off, there was this uniform expansion of everything expanding quickly, like a bomb going off. And but it was a kind of uniformly spread stuff being expanded. Excuse me. When the material was expanding, it was like uniformly distributed, kind of even. But what happens is it starts getting ripples out in this uniform lake of expanding energy. And these ripples form, if they form in a certain way, in a certain position at a certain time, then those ripples cause the energy to condense down into matter. And if there's too much of it, it can condense all the way down to solid matter and literally shrink back down again. But if there's too little of the ripples in the right places, then we could come up with matter, stars, that are expanding forever and never come back together again. In fact, we could expand so much that, the ripples can be so light and so distributed distant from each other that the matter that's formed is not even condensing into stars. It just goes on forever. So there's a very precise time in the expansion that the right quantity of the precise locations of ripples formed, and these condensed into matter, and they became galaxies and stars. And the amount that distribution of ripples in the cosmic background radiation, in order for it to come up with, at the end, at time now, in order for it to come up with the stars and the galaxies the way we see them, that picture of the Andromeda Galaxy, in order for it to come up with something like a galaxy like that, the rate and distribution of the ripples had to be accurate to 1 part in 100,000. Any more or less, we either get no material at all or we get no stars. Okay? So, 1989, a guy by the name of George Smoot worked on this NASA project, and they put up the Cosmic Background Explorer satellite. Well, George Smoot looked out there in the results from the Cosmic Background Explorer, and he literally saw the ripples in the background radiation. And the ripples in the background radiation were at the precise time and location as today's stars and galaxies are. Literally, he saw God's signature. The universe began. So we got one more. E. E stands for Einstein. Einstein, most people know Einstein was this brilliant scientist, mathematician, and he created some theories called the theory of relativity, a special theory and a general theory of relativity. And this specifically, the special relativity theory, has been verified today to 5 decimal places. Using all kinds of scientific experiments, they have determined that the law of the theory of special relativity is accurate to 5 decimal places. And the formula that defines that theory is, and a lot of people recognize this, E equals mc squared. E equals mc squared. It's almost like Einstein's signature. So what is E equals mc squared? Well, E is energy. It's measured in joules. If you're interested, a joule is a kilogram meter per second. It's a way of a joule, for example, would be about the energy required for you to lift a average size tomato about 3 feet. So if you could lift a tomato or an apple about 3 feet up, the amount of energy that would have to go into that lift with your muscles is about a joule. So what about m and c squared? M is mass, that's the material. They usually measure, in science, they measure mass as kilograms. So this would be kilograms of stuff, mass, material, any kind of material. C is the speed of light. So the speed of light, which runs around, I think, 3 times 10 to the 10th centimeters per second, it is fast. 186,000 miles per second. The speed of light is a fast, big number. But now, in this equation, it's the speed of light squared. So imagine taking 186,000 miles per second, multiplying it by itself, squaring it. We're talking high speed. So we've got energy is equal to the mass of something times the speed of light squared. What that means is you can physically and mathematically exchange some mass for energy or energy for mass. In fact, you can actually change energy and mass and affect time because they're all together in this equation. They are correlative. Literally, you can make energy out of mass, and that's exactly what happens in the atomic bomb. When the atomic bomb goes off, it is literally converting mass into energy. So you can take a couple of pounds of uranium and produce a bomb that is very, very big, okay? All right. The E and M are different states of the same material, all right? Different states of the same material. The energy and the mass, you have to get down into the details. But the way you look at energy and mass is mathematically converting back and forth. Even today, we find that all the time. They convert according to their speed, which is distance, and time. I'm kind of getting a little technical here, but the universe is made up of time, space, and material. And the material is matter and energy. And they are co-related and co-created. In other words, they came together at the same time and they relate to each other at the same time when they were created. And that is the beginning. So we've looked at surge, S-U-R-G-E. Each one of them, you are having a beginning. All right? Well then, if we got a beginning, what's the cause? I'm going to use a little tool called a syllogism. Syllogism is a logical tool you use to make decisions. For example, a typical one that people use is all men will die. Secondly, I am a man. Therefore, I will die. That's a syllogism, right? And it's a logical way of proving or disproving something. So here's a syllogism for cause. Anything that begins to exist must have a cause. This is our definition. So if you begin to exist, you must have a cause. The universe began to exist. How do we know that? Well, the Bible says it did, and so did at least 4 or 5 other things called surge, S-U-R-G-E, and we have other reasons to believe that. So the universe began to exist, and we pretty much agree on that, whether we're looking at it from the standpoint of the Bible or from science. Either God created it or surge created it, but it had a beginning. All right, so if anything begins to exist has a cause, and the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause, okay? So what are the characteristics does the cause have? Well, we created time. Time, the creation of time, the time that was created, is called tense time. So before the instant of creation, there is no past, present, and future. There is no tensed time. After the moment of creation, we then now are starting with now and the future, and as we proceed along, the future becomes now and the now becomes past. Prior to the creation of time, there was no past, present, or future. Right? Sometimes it's hard to get your head around some of these things. And the time engine was created. The time engine basically takes time and only goes forward. It only goes forward. You can't back up, at least not in this universe. And it has a uniform interval, seconds or minutes or hours, and they are correlative to space and material. Remember, Einstein's formula said that time and space and material and energy are all correlative and you can convert back and forth. So what does that mean? Prior to creation then, time is untensed. It's untense. It doesn't have a before and after. It is simply what exists. So basically our cause prior to the creation of time was not created by another previous cause. Prior to the creation of time, there was no past, present, future. He simply existed. All right? So the question, well, if God created the universe, who created God? That question doesn't work anymore because nobody created him. There was no before. There was no force before him to be created from. I'll let that sink in. That's, again, some of these things will give you a headache if you think about it. All right. So, and what's the cause? Let's take a look at some characteristics of the cause. Space is created, length, width, and height. Space is relative. It'll grow and shrink like a balloon. Material has mass, is stuff we can touch and hold. It changes density and weight and size at speed. In other words, if you move something faster, it actually gets heavier. Now, granted, you've got to be really, really moving fast for you to notice it. But the mass actually increases as you increase the speed. Mass is also relative to the speed of light. The faster you go, the time slows down. So if we move them really, really fast, they get heavier, but they're moving slower. Almost doesn't make sense. The speed of light is actually affected by mass and energy. Again, it's hard to get your head around these things. The law of causality then shows an uncaused first cause is what the cause is of the beginning of the universe. So we know that from cause and effect. We know that it's timeless. It created time, so it's not affected by time. It is timeless. It is spaceless. Space was created, therefore it can't be, you can't create space if you already have space. You can't create time if you already have time. Therefore it is spaceless and timeless. It's immaterial. In the creation, we created all material. So whatever caused the material to be created can't be made out of material because it wasn't caused yet. All right? Make sense? All right. Let's kind of summarize here. The cosmological argument, the intelligent design and morality. I think we pretty well nailed the cosmological argument. I'm sure you've got questions, and I'd love to answer them more, but some of these questions about energy and time and space and all kinds of formulas and whatnot, they get kind of complicated, and it may take a while to explain, but they're out there, and the scientists pretty well agree on them. So the cosmological argument, I think, is a fairly good argument. Let's take a look at the, well, before we do that, let's do this. Why don't we go ahead and take a break here? I've thrown a lot of material at you, and some of this stuff is really kind of bends the mind a little bit. You might want to stop and think about it, maybe do some research, Google a few things. If you have any questions about what I've covered so far, just in cause and effect, here's what you can do. If you're watching this film and this video on Facebook, you can scroll down at the bottom under the video, and there'll be a comment section. If you put a comment in there, then I can go ahead and read it. I usually check my comments and whatnot, maybe once a day. So if I see a comment in there, I'll certainly try to answer it. If you follow my Facebook page, then when I answer the comment, you'll get a notification that your comment was commented on. If you're watching this in YouTube, my YouTube channel, the same sort of thing happens. If you've already expanded the whole screen on your computer for the YouTube, you can hit the escape key and shrink it back down again to where you can scroll underneath the video and see essentially a comment section. And if you type in a question, again, I'll get a notification of it. I try to do that at least every day, and I'll go ahead and type in the answer and send it back. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, then you'll automatically get notification of the fact that I've answered your comment, and we can go back and forth. All right? So that's Q&A. I strongly recommend you go ahead and take advantage of it if you want to, if you have any questions. And so why don't we go ahead and take a break here. When you want to start back, we can come to this slide and continue. Okay, I'm assuming you either are not stopping or you've come back. So let's go ahead and look at the last two items in our Can You Believe That God Exists? We've already looked at cause and effect, the cosmological argument. We're going to look at intelligent design and morality. First, intelligent design. Intelligent design is the tool that is used as an explanatory method for people that like to look at the numbers. Just show me the numbers, show me where the dollars came from, whatever. Give me the stats, and I'll go ahead and make my decision. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the numbers. So what is ID, intelligent design? Intelligent design is based on probability. Probability is how likely is it that you will derive a specific effect from a random cause. I'll give you an example. If I have one coin, if I got one quarter, and I flip that quarter, I'm going to get either a head or a tail. The coin has two sides. I can only get one of two answers, a head or a tail. So the probability of getting a head and a tail based upon one coin flip is 50-50. 50%, 50%. Okay? Suppose I had 10 of those coins, or one coin 10 times, either way, and I did 10 tosses. What's the probability that every single one of those tosses, every single one of those coins would come up with heads? All right? Now how do we calculate that? Let's look at this. Basically, calculating probability is calculating one particular outcome divided by the number of possibilities of all outcomes. So the first case, one coin, one head, one tail. What's the probability? Well, there's two different outcomes, head and tail, and I'm looking at one of them, head, so I have a 1 divided by 2 or a half or 50% chance of getting a head. If I have 10 coins, then I have 10 halves. That's 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 until I get to 10. And I'm still looking for an outcome of heads. Heads only. So if I have one coin and I toss it 10 times, at the end of 10 tosses, I have only one outcome that I want, all heads. But I have 1,000, actually a little bit more than 1,000 possible outcomes, all right? Like half times a half times a half, that's 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32, 64, 128, 256, 512. 2 times 512 is 1,024. So there's 1,024 possible ways that could come out, but I'm only looking for head. Right? So the probability of that is only 1 in 1,000. All right. Let's go back to that Mount Rushmore, sculptor or weather. What's the probability that Mount Rushmore was caused by freezing rain, wind, and snow? What do you think? I would say pretty close to 0. The probability of Mount Rushmore being accidentally carved is pretty close to ain't gonna happen. Let me give you another example. Back when I was growing up, we had what was known as alphabet cereal. They were like Cheerios, but they were little letters. And so all the letters of the alphabet were available in Cheerios. And let's say, for example, you come downstairs to go to school, and your mom has already fixed breakfast for you. She's put a bowl of cereal out there for you to eat. And so you walk up to the table and you sit down at the table, and you notice that when in front of the bowl of cereal is 20 pieces of cereal, and they're all lined up and they're spelled out, and it says, "Take out the garbage, Mom." What is the probability that that message, "Take out the garbage, Mom," is an accidental result, a random result? Mom set down the bowl, and she set it down a little bit hard, and 20 pieces of cereal bounced out, and they just happened to line up and spell that message. "Take out the garbage, Mom." You think that's really possible? Well, let's look at it. Calculate it. The first letter, T, in take. There are 26 different letters that could be. A, B, C, D, and so forth, all the way to Z. So there's 26 possibilities for the first letter. A, in take. Again, 26 possibilities. K, 26 possibilities. E, 26 possibilities. You see where we're going here? You've got 26 times 26 times 26, 20 times. 26 to the 20th power. That's the same as 2 times 10 to the 28th. That's one chance it's going to spell out, "Take out the garbage." That's one chance in 20,000 trillion. Do you think it's random? No. Somebody put it that way. Somebody made it that way. Mom made it that way. Intelligence comes from a mind. It's not an accident of nature. Okay? Let's look at life. Intelligent design and life. One of the big issues is evolution true or not? Did man evolve from apes? So let's look at this concept of life. Evolution. Are we talking about the evolution where you're supposed to go from the goo through the zoo to you? That's called macroevolution. Is macroevolution really true? Can you believe it? Well, is it accident? Is it really? What are the odds? A point of clarification here. Macroevolution is this evolution of goo through the zoo to you. That's where you start out with an amoeba and you work your way all the way up through all kinds of fishes and little animals and monkeys and end up coming up with man. That is considered macroevolution. Also, you will hear microevolution. Microevolution is sometimes called adaptation. Microevolution is when, for example, you have an E. coli infection or a MRSA infection from the hospital or getting sick, and they give you some medication for it, and you don't take all of the medication, you leave half a bottle left. Well, you've only killed maybe half of the germs, half of the viruses, half of the bacteria. So then you've left another half that lasted through the first half of the drug. They were resistant, and they're stronger, and now you're going to get sick again, and they give you another prescription, and you only take half of that, and the bugs get even stronger and stronger and stronger until eventually you have adapted this bacteria to this particular medication to where the medication doesn't even work anymore. All right? And that's called microevolution. We're talking about macro. All right, so how do we know whether or not macroevolution works accidentally, random? Well, let's look at the most complex message in the entire universe, and that's DNA. The life-forming, life-controlling message that the entire body is built upon, all the biology and the chemistry is built upon constructing various chemical and physical properties from a thing called DNA. DNA, we build the DNA by taking a phosphate molecule and some sugar and some nucleic acid, 4 different acids. Sometimes this combination is called deoxyribose, nucleic acid. And there's 4 different kinds of them. And two of them always hook up with 2 others, and they're different. For example, the adenine and thymine hook up together, and cytosol and guanylyl hook up together. So A's and T's and C's and G's. They form basically a code. And based upon these 4 different molecules and 4 different ways they can combine, we now have a message system, a way of communicating information 4 bits at a time. By putting the 4 different ways, either AC or AT or TA, and putting them in certain sequence, you can now build a message based upon 4 codes. That's DNA. Now, we take that DNA and we copy it out of the nucleus of the cell into the ribosomes. The ribosomes are out in the base of the outer section of the cell, where there's lots of amino acids. And these amino acids, there's a different amino acid that's attached to a 3-code type of DNA called RNA. And so the DNA takes these special amino acids and arranges them in a certain sequence, and thousands and thousands and thousands of these amino acids get arranged in the proper sequence, and they form proteins. And then proteins act as enzymes that help building the other parts of the body, the carbohydrates and lipids and so forth. So everything is based upon, or a lot of it, nowadays we're seeing some other things, but a lot of it is built upon this DNA, the most complicated, complex message in the universe. Now let's look at a simple cell. And by a simple cell, I'm talking like an amoeba, one of these little squirmy, gooey kind of looking things in the microscope, about maybe the size of a big grain of salt. And it's just one cell, and they kind of ooze themselves around and fold themselves over a piece of food and digest it and whatnot. So these amoebas, there's basically about 250 genes in the DNA of the nucleus of an amoeba. And these genes code for proteins, and the proteins code for everything else, and we build an amoeba. So can I build 250 genes accidentally? The odds against coming up with that much different DNA that codes that much different amino acids, that codes that much different proteins, and these are very, very specific proteins. They only work at their particular size and length. What's the odds of that happening? Well, trust me, I'm not going to go over the math, but it is 10 to the 200th or more odds against it. In other words, the odds of the amoeba coming accidentally is 1 divided by 10 to the 200 zeros. 200 zeros. Is that possible? Let me say this. I use what's called an upper universal boundary. If something gets above this particular number, I can say with confidence it is impossible. My upper universal boundary basically looks at 3 things. If I look at every single particle, every proton, neutron, electron, photon, pion, meson, every single particle in the universe, I have about 10 to the 80th of them. That's a 1 followed by 80 zeros. And if early in the evolution of the universe, where all of this stuff is kind of jammed together and it's kind of hot, really, really hot, and all these particles are bouncing around and hitting each other, and they have the ability, the opportunity to multiple particles coming together and sticking together and forming a molecule that forms some sort of a chemical that could form into an enzyme and so forth. What are the possibilities of those things coming together? Well, they're bouncing around. Those 10 to the 80th particles are bouncing around over very short distances, very, very fast, almost the speed of light. In fact, they're bouncing around at 10 to the 55 bounces per second. So that means all particles are bumping into each other at the rate of 10 to the 55th particles bouncing together every second. And then the third number is 10 to the 17th. That is the number of seconds that are in the universe that long age universe people think is 13.5 or something billion years. Well, 13.5 billion years is 10 to the 17th seconds. So I'm saying that if you add those up and kind of round it up, it comes to 10 to the 150th. If any number, if any probability comes in at greater than 10 to the 150th, there is literally no chance that enough bouncing around of chemistry over the entire length of the universe has given an opportunity to create any part of it. It is impossible. So 10 to the 200th in a simple cell with 200 genes is well over the upper universal boundary. And that's for a simple cell. When you get up to, like human beings, very complicated cells, it is way, way bigger than 10 to the 200th. All right, so let's look at the conclusion of intelligent design. We have some natural laws. They are precise and they are consistent. We have life, which is macro-designed, micro-adaptable, and the overall shows intentional planning. And that's called the teleological argument. Now let's look at a syllogism for this. Number one, if every design has a designer, and the universe is a highly complex design, the universe has a designer. All right? So intelligent design, the universe has a designer. When we know that the universe has a uncaused first cause, now we know that he's doing some design. All right, let's look at the third one and close this thing up. We did the cosmological argument. We've done the intelligent design argument. Let's look at morality. And morality is not based on numbers or based upon science or math or any of those things. It's based on just what makes sense to me. All right, here we go. I want to set the stage. I'm going to ask you a question, just an imaginary question. And it's going to help answer what's the difference between right and wrong, good or bad. How do we determine if something is right or wrong or good or bad? Let me ask you this. Do you think that throwing babies off of tall buildings just to watch them go splat, or taking babies and torturing them, punishing them, and doing horrible things to them, do you think that is right or wrong? Is it good or bad? Well, hopefully you'll have said, no, that's wrong. We don't do that. Nobody does that. Anybody that does that sort of thing is really, really bad. The actual meaning, the actual answer to that question is a fact. It is bad, it is wrong, and I am looking at what's called the ontology of that question. I'm going to give you two new words. What the actual definition is of something, what it really is ontology. There's another aspect, the other word, well, let me go back up. The ontology is called the philosophical study of being, existence, and reality. The second word is epistemology. Epistemology is, how do we know that? The theory of knowledge. How do we know what we know? So the question about torturing babies, yeah, it's wrong. How do we know that? Well, we may know that because our mother said so and our father said so, and I learned about it in school, and I read it on the internet, and society tells me that, and we have laws. Those are all different ways that you learn that it's wrong, that you know that it's wrong, but the actual definition of why is it wrong, that's ontology. So ontology and epistemology. and people will often get those confused. Now let's jump into morality. I'm going to start here, and we've got a little red box in the center called you, or y'all, if it's plural. And then I'm going to come over here and draw a arrow to the right and call this deontological ethics. There's the word ontology in the middle of that word. So how do we define something as right or wrong? When I'm dealing with other people, I define it because there's rules we have to follow, laws we have to follow, and so forth. So a collection of definitions of right and wrong that we learn from each other and from the laws around us, that is called deontological ethics, okay? If there's a rule that says it is wrong because the rule says it is. Doesn't matter how you learn it, it's wrong is wrong is wrong. All right, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line over on the left-hand side, sociology. This is the y'all side. If y'all, the whole group of us, all the people that I'm dealing with, if y'all are trying to compare yourself with another society of y'alls, maybe the y'alls from the United States as compared to the y'alls in Japan or the y'alls in Saudi Arabia. The difference between the rules and what you have to do and what you can't do and what you can do, the rules between societies is called sociological. And they define what is right and what is wrong. And trust me, there are things that y'all in the United States believe is right and wrong, that if you go over to Saudi Arabia and do some of those things, you're in deep, deep trouble, because over there it is not wrong. They have a different society with a different culture and different religions, and a lot of what they consider okay, we would consider absolutely, totally wrong. So those are the differences, but they're the way we learn them. We learn them from either sociological or deontological ethics. So that is the epistemology. Well, what about those things that are wrong for everybody? Doesn't matter where you are, it's just flat out wrong. Because regardless of where you're going, or what countries you're in, or societies you're in, torturing babies for fun, that's just flat out wrong. If you're mentally fit, I mean, you're not crazy, then torturing babies for fun is going to be bad. It's going to be wrong, regardless. Well, where did that come from? Where did that rule come from? And yet, every one of us seems to have it. It comes from God, because that rule is established by God for us to follow, and when we follow it, that is called morality. So, morality is the rule set by God. Sociology and deontological ethics, the epistemology, is the rules set by us and how we learn them. So, if the universe is all there is, time, space, material, and laws, then what are we? What are we? Are we what we eat? Yeah, okay, some people think so. You are what you eat. You are what you think. How does thinking work? Well, I don't want to get into neurology and brain surgery and whatnot, but basically thinking is just the chemical reactions happening in your brain with electrical signals bouncing from cell to cell, causing a network of connections that makes a thought that says, hey, I'm looking at a red apple, or hey, I am walking down the street. This is just a kind of a biochemistry, chemical reaction in my head called thinking. If TSM is all there is, if time, space, material is all that exists, and laws of physics all that exist, then what you are thinking is you're a moist robot. You're a molecular machine, and you don't have conscious thought. In other words, you don't decide what you're going to think about and then think about it. Conscious thought means decision process. You have unconscious thought. You have no control over it. It's whatever your chemistry wants to do. It's called dancing to your DNA. Well, then how do you determine what's right and wrong? If TSM is all there is, and we don't have a ontological definition of right and wrong, then what is right and wrong? Well, let's look at this. What's the difference between Adolf Hitler and Mother Teresa? Adolf Hitler basically did whatever he wanted to do. Start wars, kill people, burn folks, attack. Adolf Hitler did whatever he felt like he wanted to do. Mother Teresa, on the other hand, was operating according to a set of rules, a guideline that was set by something outside of TSM. Mother Teresa is following the set of rules set by God, morality, okay? So Adolf Hitler, he has opinions. He has an opinion of what's right, and he does whatever he wants to, whether it is good or bad, right or wrong. He's running by his opinions. Whereas Mother Teresa is running based upon standards. And where do those standards come from when they do not come from the red arrows here from sociology or deontology? The standards come from God. In fact, they are the characteristics of God, the very characteristics of God. Well, is evil then a thing? Is it created? Well, evil is obviously the opposite of good. Then is evil something that you can actually, I don't know, wrap up and save, take with you? Is it really a created thing? I think the answer is no. Evil is not a thing. Let me give you two examples, shadows and rust. If you got a sunny day and you step out your front door and you stand in the front yard and you look down at your feet, you'll see your shadow. What is the shadow? Is the shadow a thing? Is it something that you can like fold up and put in an envelope and stick it in your pocket and take it with you? No. A shadow is the absence of light. Light is the thing. A shadow is just where the thing isn't hit. It's dark. A shadow is the absence of light. Many years ago, I used to live in upstate New York. And up in New England, where you have snow 3 or 4 months of the year, everybody would buy a brand new car, and about a year or two later, it would look terrible. The whole bottom of the car, quarter panels, doors, rust. They just literally rusted away. Why? Because the roads in the wintertime, when they're icy and slippery, were spread with salt to melt that. And the salt got up under the car, and it just literally rusted out the metal panels at the bottom of the car. And you can pretty well tell a car was from New England if you saw it in Florida because of this rust. So in terms of a car with rust, if I were able to remove all of the rust from the car, what would I have? I'd have a nice car. I'd have a much nicer car, a nice metal car. However, if I remove all the car from the rust, what do I have? Nothing. Nothing. What is rust? Rust is the absence of good, clean metal. All right? So, what is evil? Evil is not something that God created. Evil is an absence of that godly influence called standards. All right. Well, what does that mean then? That means that if evil exists, then standards exist. If shadows exist, then sunlight exists. If evil exists, standards exist, then God exists. How do we all know this? If we're not learning it epistemologically, from society or deontological, we learn it Basically, the example is Romans 1:18. God's standard is written on our hearts. Where do we learn it from? It is written on our hearts. We don't have to learn it. It's there when we're born, written on our hearts. All right, let's go back to the list here. We got cosmological, done, intelligent, done, morality. That makes sense to me. It's done now. So, if we have got the cosmological argument that says, here is a cause, an uncaused first cause, which is timeless, material, and spaceless, and omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. And by the way, he decided to create the universe. He made a decision to create the universe. Well, only people, only persons, only living things make decisions. A rock is not going to decide to change into a baseball or a puddle of mud. Rocks don't make decisions. Living, deciding people, creatures make decisions. So in addition to being timeless, spaceless, material, omnipotent, omnipresent, and omnipotent, and first cause, uncaused, he's also personal. That's what we get out of the cosmological argument. Intelligent design comes from intelligence. And only intelligence can produce design. And morality says there are standards. And that standard is God. And why do we know that? God wrote that on our hearts. So based on those three issues, then what do we call our God? Can we believe that God exists? Yeah, he exists. And we call him God. So there it is. I've killed about a little over an hour of your time. I appreciate your sticking with me. Again, if you have any questions and answers or queries that you'd like to ask me about, by all means, go to the comments and do that. If you want to chit-chat with me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Put your questions in the question section, and we can go back and forth. And you can get to the YouTube channel with that address right there. Fire up youtube.com and search for @Rathkamp_apologetics. Hopefully I've invested an hour of your time in a worthwhile manner. Got you to think about some things, maybe answered some questions, got you to want to inquire a little bit more. If that's happened, then I've achieved what I set out to do. And I appreciate your time in listening to me. And I look forward to more of these as we go along. In fact, now that we've decided we can call him God, I think the next topic I'll talk about is miracles. Do miracles really, really happen? Anyway, we'll take that as a teaser for the next one. Again, thank you, and take care. Have a good day. Wonderful. Be blessed.